All right, this is your World War III breaking news, emergency late night update. We had to do a video about this because this is crazy. Okay, so they're doing it. This is the normalization of the use of tactical nuclear weapons. That's the buzzword, tactical. All that really means is that they can go up to 20 times the size of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and not 100 times, okay? 350 kilotons is where they put the upper limit on what constitutes a tactical nuclear weapon. And in this video, I can't remember what this brown-nosing establishment stooge's name is, he's going to tell you how nothing is off the table according to the Telegraph, who has insight into what the White House is talking about, and they're saying that nothing is off the table with respect to nuclear weapons. Trump is reticent about using nukes because he's a good guy, right? And but this is how they move the goalposts. So I'm going to decipher the real meaning to these types of messages in just a moment, but let's first listen to what he has to say.
The Guardian reported Trump was getting cold feet.
Oh, it's the Guardian, not the Telegraph.
Worried about the effectiveness of bunker busters and not willing to use tactical nukes. But the White House tells Fox that's not true. Everything's on the table, even tactical nukes. The big...
He's so excited about it, isn't he? And this whole thing, guys, understand what this is. This is to move the goalposts so then they can say, you know, Trump, because he's such a good guy, because he's a man of peace, he's not going to use the nuclear option, right? Because there's too much potential for residual unintended effects. But he's going to bomb the shit out of the country anyways.
The big question is, if the United States does target Iran, what happens next? The White House isn't considering boots on the ground. Iran's 3 times the size of Texas and surrounded by mountains.
Well, at least he knows more about the geography than Ted Cruz. I guess that's a step in the right direction. So yeah, that's what this whole conversation is about. It's about moving the conversation from will we do something to how we're going to do it. Because now the debate is going to be, you can't use tactical nuclear weapons, right? This is the old, the door in the face sales tactic. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. Okay, I have a better offer for you then. This is going to be way better. No nuclear weapons, just a whole shitload of conventional ordnance. We may get one of our stealth bombers shot down, but hey, if it means that we'll have casus belli to continue into the conflict and ultimately put boots on the ground, then it was worth it. Cue the military draft. Okay, so here's what's going down. Seymour Hersh, widely recognized as an exemplar of journalistic integrity, the guy who called out the Nord Stream attack, which is now basically status quo information. When I say call out, meaning implicating Western intelligence agencies in that attack. He is now saying that Trump has approved a full-scale U.S. strike on Iran and that it is going to happen over the weekend. Now, right now, we are hearing all about how they're negotiating. And look, throughout this entire period, every single time it's been perfidy. It's the perfect word. It's basically a word to describe, and it's actually, I believe it's a crime, technically. It's when you pretend to be a good faith negotiator, but then you, with the intention of stabbing the person behind the back, right? In the back. So essentially what's been going on here is that they've been continuously stringing the Iranians along. But interestingly, I believe it was one of the Iranian top, either the new chief of staff or one of their top generals today. He was doing an interview with an Iranian news service, and he said that he knew that the war was coming since March, that they knew that this was inevitable. So they were preparing for it this whole time. They got caught with their pants down with respect to having their entire upper echelon wiped out, but they claimed that they knew that the war was coming and that they knew that the negotiations were all fake since March. So what that means is that the Iranians are playing along at the same time, because what else can you do? If you don't do that, then that doesn't look good in the eyes of the international community. So Seymour Hersh is saying that Donald Trump has already approved participation in the strikes on Iran. As I previously indicated, it's just a matter of how they're going to partake. And the Pulitzer Prize winning Seymour Hersh has quoted sources: centrifuges at the Fordow nuclear facility will not be attacked until the weekend. And the reason why Psy Hersh says this is going to be the case, and I actually think that's misdirection. I don't think they're even going to focus on Fordow because it's just too built up. I mean, the Iranians are too prepared for that, right? So it's probably going to be that they're going to bury the lead and it's going to be something else that they're focusing on. It's a red herring. Will they bomb it just to make sure that, you know, just so that the Iranians can talk about it, so they can say that we didn't lie? Probably. But I don't think that that's a main objective here. So anyway, Psy Hersh is saying that they want to do it before the weekend because Trump thinks that the whole situation will calm down by Monday and won't disturb the markets. I don't really buy that, okay? Because Trump has done things that are so mercurial that they've disturbed the markets, like the China thing, and they didn't seem to care. If anything, all it means is that there's going to be another opportunity for insider trading. So I'm not so sure about this theory. This is something we've floated on the channel many times, that they often do these big attacks on the weekends because, you know, it doesn't spook the markets as much. But the idea that you're going to bomb a nuclear facility and the Iranians are going to respond, as they've said they're going to respond, by attacking all the U.S. military bases, and things are just going to, you know, work themselves out by Monday. I suspect that that's probably not going to work. So this is all just a bunch of bullshit. To be brutally honest, I respect Seymour Hersh, and I think that there's definitely a lot to what he's saying. And I also think that this idea that we're going to know in 2 weeks is also an attempt to try to string the Iranians along a little bit longer and hope that we can catch them off guard once again, because, you know, they still have quite a few spies on the ground. But I'm not so sure that this is going to be the focal point. And if they really think that this is going to end by Monday, it's not going to end by Monday. That's just ridiculous. White House considers dropping nukes on Iran. They'll be able to convince MAGA to join this war. Just watch. Just watch. You know, people are unfortunately very fickle. And it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats. All it takes is fear of the other side, and they will support you all the way to the bitter, radioactive, apocalyptic end, unfortunately. So what I mean by that is he's going to do it. And then there might even be some retaliation from Iran. And then he's going to be able to see, I told you these guys were bad, right? These guys were, what did they say here on Fox? What was Iran wants to hold the world hostage. Yep. Because they just keep invading other countries. I mean, consider this. Here we are lamenting about the Russians using or potentially using nuclear weapons and just engaged in nuclear brinkmanship for the last 3 years. And here we've altered our nuclear doctrine well in advance, like 2 years ago, in order to permit us to attack a non-nuclear state with nuclear weapons. That wasn't always the case, right? That wasn't the case in the Iraq War. It wasn't the case in the war in Syria or in Afghanistan. It's only in the last 2 years that they've made these changes to the nuclear doctrine of the United States that permits them to use nuclear weapons against countries that don't have nuclear weapons. You think that's a coincidence that all of this is just happening right now? Look, it doesn't matter if it was Kamala or if it was Trump that got elected. The Israelis set this plan in motion probably more than a year ago. They say it took them about a year. But understand what that means. That means that they would have executed it regardless. So, and if they didn't, then they could have potentially run the risk of getting busted. So they had to do it, right? So understand that this is a continuity of government plan. It makes no difference whatsoever who's in charge. Right now, the U.S. Nuclear Command aircraft E-4B Night Watch has arrived in D.C. This actually happened yesterday, but it bears repeating that this is the first time this has happened, okay, since 2011. or 2001, I should say, 9/11. Now, interestingly, it is a pagan holiday, or a holiday which is typically associated with ritualistic human sacrifice, a few hundred years ago type stuff, so we're told. But I think when you're bored on the top, you guys ever seen the movie Cabin in the Woods or The Hunger Games? I think there's maybe a little bit of truth to that. So I would not be surprised if they pull the trigger tomorrow, which is going to be the longest day of the year, right? And oddly enough, Juneteenth made it so that a lot of people took time off, okay? And let's just say I heard it through the grapevine that some people in prestigious positions have the weekend off. Now, if you were going to do some crazy shit and you didn't know what the outcome was going to be, because you don't know if the Iranians don't have nuclear weapons, and if you're going to pull the trigger, nuking some of their facilities, which you've already imprinted in the minds of the masses, so that when it happens, it's going to be like, oh, they did it, right? The shock, it diminishes the shock. It's like preemptive damage control. You're priming the people to accept something. You talk about it and you say, no, we're never going to do it. It's like how they've released new weapons into the theater of war in Ukraine and Russia over time. First they talk about it, they say F-16s, no, we're never going to do that. And it's a big debate for a year and a half, and then they eventually do it. And people are just like, well, they did it, right? If they do it, and the demonstration of the two-stage IRBM, which was very similar to the Orezhnik missile launched by the Russians, if that Iranian missile was telegraphing to the West that, hey, we have the means to deploy these nuclear weapons in a way that you can't shoot them down because this thing travels at Mach 14, just like the Russian Orezhnik, but of course we'll never see because it's illegal to show footage in Israel unless you're allowed to do it, right? Although I think the Iranians might have made it so that that spectacle could have been caught on film. Apparently, they claim that they shot it down, or who knows, maybe there was some other malfunction. Regardless, the Iranians have demonstrated the ability to put heavy payloads dead center on target in Tel Aviv. Are they also telegraphing that we have a nuclear weapon? Are they also perhaps telegraphing that we're willing to use nuclear weapons? All this talk about martyr this, martyr that, I mean, hey, you might as well go out with a bang, right? Maybe that's what the Ayatollah is thinking at the tail end of his life. So what an interesting weekend to put all this stuff in motion. You got the doomsday plane. You got a lot of bigwigs who just so happen to have the weekend off. I wonder where they're vacating to. Could it be someplace subterranean? I'm not saying get freaked out. I'm just saying if there ever was a good time to let this shit rip, this is the time. All right? So I would just pay attention because they keep moving more military assets to the Middle East. They're evacuating people they're evacuating all the embassies throughout the Middle East, all the embassies in Iran emptying out. Israel attacked the water cooling facility at the Iranian nuclear reactor in Iran, not Iraq, but Iran, as you can see here. Now, I don't even know if this was a fully operational nuclear facility yet, so it hasn't been deemed like a radiological incident by the wholly compromised International Atomic Energy Agency, which is essentially on par with the WHO in terms of, how in bed they are with the West and how weaponized that global institution has become. So the Iranians have casus belli to attack the Dimona plant. Now, there's been rumblings tonight, in fact, as we speak, there has been threats made according to, now this is hard for me to explain, is popular Israeli accounts on Telegram and X are claiming that Iranian accounts are saying that they're going to target the Dimona nuclear plant. Now, there were just missiles fired at the Negev desert I think some landed in Beersheba. I think some might have been targeting the airbase there. But in that region is also the Dimona nuclear power plant. And these pro-Israeli accounts are claiming that the Iranian accounts are about to target the Dimona plant. Now, this is the perfect setup for a false flag attack. And these guys love to mirror. So they're the ones who are bombing nuclear facilities inside Iran. So of course, they're going to play the victim and say that they're bombing our nuclear facility. The decision has been made. Okay, do they even need a casus belli at this point? They had the hospital thing that happened last night. And Iran is also saying, let me just see here, my phone is dying. It should be all right. That's my screen, so I can make sure that I'm in focus there. Let me just make sure that this is plugged in here. Technology is not cooperating. Let's see. Let's try this one out here. Let's try this one. So this map that you guys are seeing right now, this is all of the U.S. bases that Iran claims they're going to attack. Why is this not working? I guess it doesn't really matter, but it's kind of pissing me off at the same time. Okay, anyways, who cares? Now, interestingly, you also have military bases in Turkey, and at Incirlik base in Turkey, they store nuclear weapons, the tactical nuclear weapons that are distributed throughout Europe, US's tactical nuclear weapons. So that's kind of interesting. U.S. citizens seeking to depart Israel contact us. So they're trying to get all of the dual citizens out of Israel, I presume. Not sure how that works. This is just an interesting video to give you some perspective. You can see this on the Maritime Tracker app. I can't remember what that one is called. It's like flight radar, but it's like for vessels. And so this is just to give you an example. This is one day. This is on the 13th of just how much stuff is going on here. You have all kinds of offshore oil rigs. You have lots of oil tankers. We just had Doomberg on the channel today where he broke down what the impacts are going to be if this little place right here, this is kind of the bottleneck. That's the Strait of Hormuz, okay? That's where you pass into the Persian Gulf from the Gulf of Oman. So it's this point here where they could effectively make it a non-economically viable situation for any traffic to pass through here, because either they would be firing drones onto these ships, and there's all kinds of complications that might prevent this, but this is one of their nuclear options. Or they could mine the sea to hell, and it could just be impassable. And anybody who tried to go in there and demine it, they would shoot them with drones, presumably. So there's a lot of traffic that goes through here. 30% of all the oil comes from here, and 20 to 25% of it gets shipped out of there to the rest of the world. So we got the Dimona stuff. New York Times, U.S. intel believes Khamenei's death would push Iran to build a bomb immediately. I don't understand the structure of Islam, but there's the Grand Ayatollah, and then there are Ayatollahs. And the Grand Ayatollah, who I believe is in Pakistan, has also said that if the Ayatollah was killed, it would cause like this widespread Shiite Muslim uprising around the world. So, you never know. That's very possible, but I think if that was the case too, then, and if Israel knew that, or if intelligence agencies knew that, and they attempted to kill him, because apparently, according to a renowned reporter in the Middle East, who is thoroughly vetted in terms of the veracity of their claims, they claim that he was almost killed in the initial attack on day one. They got him out of the house, I think, like a couple hours before it happened or something like that. Like it wasn't that long thereafter, just a few minutes, few hours, whatever. Afterwards, the house was hit, it was destroyed, he survived. So if they knew that, then, I mean, I think there's a distinct possibility if the Iranians already know that they're being played, then they already know how this game ends, and it ends with them getting a nuclear weapon. And I'm pretty sure that they probably wouldn't ever back out of the non-proliferation treaty, because when it comes to do or die, and when it comes to an existential problem like this, you're going to keep it a secret until you have it, right? And it's not just how long is it to create a nuclear weapon. It's not like they're going to create one bomb and that's going to be it. They at least need to have a dozen to establish deterrence. Now, this is interesting. This is the Russian, she's with the Russian Foreign Ministry. I can't remember what her role is, Maria Zakharova. Let's see what she has to say.
Russia calls on the Israeli leadership to come to senses and immediately stop attacks on nuclear installations and sites under safeguards and subject to IAEA verification activities. And we're particularly concerned about the safety of the Bushehr nuclear power plant, which employs Russian specialists.
200 Russian specialists work at the Bushehr nuclear plant. So are these guys being kept there as some kind of tripwire, so that if and when they get targeted, that's when Russia has their casus belli to provide missile defense to Iran? If you caught my video yesterday, it really does seem like they're setting a trap. Putin is way too excited about the current circumstances. Now, you might chalk that up to the fact that the price of oil is going up again as a result of this war, and that's good for Russia's bottom line, or that it takes attention away from Europe, which it's probably not. All it's going to do is give Europeans a reason to arm Ukraine with even more powerful weapons. And now Ukraine just created its own ballistic missiles, so that's going to enter the fray very soon. But it seems as though the Russians are trying to bait NATO into a war that NATO thinks it can win, but Russia and China are going to swoop in at the last minute if they don't already have these systems there working with the Iranians or under the guidance of sheep-dipped Russian soldiers. That just means Russian soldiers who are masquerading as Iranian soldiers, but they're really Russians and they know how to run the radars and the missile defense launchers and all that stuff, and maybe even the warplanes. That's what's going to happen, that they don't want to be too overt about their support for Iran, because that might deter the West from wanting to enter the conflict. And China is keeping it on the down low too. Both countries have a vested interest in using Iran as a strategic fixing maneuver of sorts to tie up Western resources in that region. It buys China more time to build up for their coming war with the US in the Pacific. And of course, it gives Russia more time to prepare. So I think they will swoop in at the last minute. And I think right now, the timing of Putin's message, as I indicated in my video yesterday, that he was really trying to make it abundantly clear that they're not offering the Iranians any military support. And it was almost too obvious what he was trying to do. It was, he tends to be a very phlegmatic individual, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you can always contain, when you're nonverbals, when you're excited about something. And for a guy who's currently in the midst of a hot war and having his southern flank potentially invaded by NATO, he just seemed a little too calm, cool, and collected. So, especially considering that today the Boeing P-8A Poseidon manned aircraft is back in the Black Sea again, and they use manned aircrafts now because, of course, they act as human shields. So it's better than a drone, because the drone would likely be shot down by the Russians, but they know that if were Russia to shoot this down, that would obviously trigger Article 4 and 5. And remember, these guys, it seems they want nuclear war. That's the only conclusion we can come to, is that they really do want to provoke a nuclear war. They think it can be limited, and they think that ultimately cooler heads are going to prevail, and they're going to be able to slow the progression up the escalation ladder, perhaps, or that the damage that the other side is going to sustain is going to be existential for them, but not for us. Maybe the U.S. is in a very uniquely advantageous position in that we're separated by two oceans, whereas everybody over there, there's land bridges. Let's hear what Levitt has to say about the decision on Iran in the next 2 weeks.
That Iran has never been closer to obtaining a nuclear weapon.
And then if the U.S.
That Iran has never been closer to obtaining a nuclear weapon.
And then if
So
the US
they're saying that Iran is, I can't remember, I think it's 2 weeks to get a nuclear weapon. And they're saying they're going to wait 2 weeks. So those two things just don't add up. They're going to do something before. They're probably going to do something this weekend. Seymour Hersh is right.
First take some type of military action, would the president go to Congress to seek war authority?
I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals. I gave you the statement from the president. He'll make a decision within 2 weeks.
That's a pretty clear-cut question, though. Would the president seek congressional authority to go to war? And she didn't want to answer that question, which means that he probably won't, right? Even though there's enough support, as we've seen, from those obsequious standing ovations that Netanyahu got. What did he get, like the most standing ovations ever? More than the State of the Union addresses, even. And that was largely bipartisan. So they're going to go to war, guys. I mean, I don't know how many times I got to say this shit. People are still like, are they really going to war? You think you're going to do it? I don't know. So they're trying to do this stuff. It's granite, okay? It's solid granite mountains. There's no way you're getting bunker busters in there. You would have to light that place up. Maybe they just want to get rid of their old stock. Maybe that's what this is, kind of like Ukraine. We got to, make a reason we got to do something with this stuff. It's just, we're hoarding all these weapons and we got to use them. So let's go to the range being someone else's country. In Belarus, the Russians are moving a lot of weapons in. Let me see if I have any details on this specific story here. This is something worth paying attention to. Russia's shipping bombs, missiles to Belarus. Deliveries to Lida and Provoking stations near strategic air missile facilities. Interesting. Very interesting. Now, they do have some exercises coming up in late June. It could be what this is for, but it could also be for a major offensive, which is well overdue, and the clock is ticking, of course, to get that show on the road, because, of course, when the rainy season comes or the wet season comes, once again, it is not going to be optimal conditions. According to Reza Pahlavi, who I call Count Dracula, because he kind of looks like Count Dracula, he is the son of the Shah, the regime's command structure is collapsing. And so what they're trying to do, and what they've always tried to do with Iran, is they try to undermine the government there by sowing discord and creating chaos in the streets. It's never worked. It's almost worked a little bit, but it's caused protests in the same way that it does in the United States, right? But it's never really reached that critical mass of effect. But he's saying that the chain of command is teetering, and of course, the place is rife with all kinds of spies and saboteurs. And you know this because immediately when one of these guys dies, you get confirmation almost within minutes on these OSINT gathering platforms. So you know that there are people who are narcs in the country and are on the ground with eyes to see. And because Iran is such a massive country, despite being more monolithic in their culture and perhaps more regimented in terms of how authoritarian the society is, still, resembling a lot of how things work in the West here. However, there's that theocratic bend to it. But I think there is, you would think, that they would have a handle on things. So just imagine how bad it would be here, And I think it was Doomberg who was making a point of this on the channel today, that we do live in a glass house in the United States. It's pretty open, it's pretty free. He was making the example of referencing the example of these big power lines that we have going across Canada. And just one of these, in the middle of the forest somewhere where nobody is ever going to go, it wouldn't be hard to take one of these things out, and then you've basically just killed power to hundreds of thousands of people. And you could do that in multiple places. They know that if you take out, I think it's 9 of select transformers in the United States, it would bring down the entire power grid just because of the way that the grid is interconnected and wired. So we are incredibly vulnerable to this type of attack, this type of asymmetrical hybrid warfare. And it hasn't come here yet because they've yet to burn those 0 days and awaken those sleeper cells. But the moral of the story is it could. This was kind of interesting. This is in Israel, and it appears as though bunker exclusion is already a thing, and it's not even nuclear war yet. So these people were trying to get into a bunker, I guess, across the street, but because they weren't from there, or they weren't, I don't know, they didn't speak the right language, maybe they were too Muslim or something, they wouldn't let them in the bunker. But they look like they're just, other Jewish, believing being, whatever, religious or ethnic, however you want to call yourself Jewish. What I'm trying to say is they wouldn't let him in, okay? And so imagine an actual SHTF scenario, how this is going to go down. We're not letting you in. Now, these are always temporary. Like, this is always typically 20 minutes, half an hour, usually, that they have to go into these bunkers before the IDF says you can come out. So just that's how selfish people are, right? And that's going to be the case no matter where you go. At least they have bunkers there. We don't have bunkers here. This is SpaceX rocket. Went boom. Damn, that rocket fuel really rips. Really, really rips. Nobody was hurt, surprisingly. Look at that. That is massive. Crazy. I just thought that was kind of cool. This is the Fordow facility. So they say. They don't really know, right? Because there could be all kinds of tunnels in here that we don't know about. And these are the tunnels that they know. But what I was trying to say yesterday, let's say they have a hidden tunnel over here and you're bombing the shit out of it right here, and they have another thing that goes down. And so even if you try to entomb this in order to delay or, cause it so that the people inside die from asphyxiation, and I'm sure they have all kinds of, backup oxygen and stuff like that in there. They're prepared for these things, right? That was one of the ways that Nasrallah died, is that I think they were supposed to have oxygen in the bunker, but for some reason they didn't, or it wasn't working, or something like that. He died of asphyxiation. So the bunker buster couldn't even kill a guy in Lebanon. So we don't really know, like, this is just engaging in this kind of warfare. Unless you get guys on the ground, which they've been training for, you still have to get guys in there and sabotage the place. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to work, but who knows? Anything's possible this day and age. What else do we got going on here? Is that a wrap? Oh, yeah. Looks like they're moving more. This is the biggest military plane. I can't remember what it's called. What the hell is this one called? U.S. C-5M Super Galaxy en route to the Middle East. U.S. strategic airlift aircraft flying over Saudi Arabia from Aviano Air Base. So they're getting the Saudis the missile defense, I guess, that they need to protect Saudi Aramco when the sparks start to fly. Iran's still struggling with their internet, but they're bringing it back online. They said they had to take down the internet so to prevent cyber attacks from the Israelis. So they shut down the entire internet. Just remember, they can shut down the internet. The government can shut down the internet. They can do it, and they probably will do it. And it's going to freak a lot of people out to not have the degree of connectivity. We really do take for granted the fact that we know in an instant nowadays before the news, in most cases, what's going on the other side of the planet. That is something that we've all become accustomed to. It used to take probably 3 months to get one message, and then by the time you got the message, everything had changed, right? So we take that for granted, but that's potentially the world we're looking at, which is why you want to get into radio. And I want to send a shout out there if anybody is in the Saskatoon region and you know ham radio. I'm talking like expert level ham radio, not just you tinker around with a Baofeng radio. I want to do a video for people on like professional ham radio so we can get ourselves prepared to do long range communication around the world if and when it hits the fan. I understand that it's going to be likely something that requires an investment, not only in time and education, but also monetarily. But it's something I really want to look at and actually getting a full antenna set up, like the whole 9 yards. Something that's not going to stand out from the road, but something that's going to be good enough, or something that I can potentially conceal, in order to receive signals, because I wouldn't trust satellite radio. I mean, it's good if you have a satellite radio, that's great. You got your shortwave radio, you got all your short range comms, you have your CB, your GMRS, your Baofengs. It's good to have, even if you don't have a ham radio license, because look, if the shit's hitting the fan, then the government's, actually, you know what? If the government has one role in SHTF, they're still going to be handing out tickets. The one thing they won't do is hand out MREs, unfortunately. But if you know somebody in the region who is really adept at that kind of stuff, let me know. Just message me through the account that's linked through this YouTube channel. Just go there and you just go to the home page and it will direct you to, there's a spot where it says email. I'm reluctant to say the email because, you know how it is. But yeah, I'm really interested in that, and I'm trying to not only get the knowledge for myself, but put something together that is really understandable for people, And in order for me to do that, it has to be hands-on. I am willing to travel to go somewhere to see somebody, to talk about it, but I would like to, if possible, do it locally. It's just easier to accommodate. All right, guys, I got to go to bed because I have a feeling that it's going to be a very eventful day tomorrow. See you on the flip side.